Yeah, and that story forms part of our weekly feature, of course, where we look at the stories which dominated headlines in the past 7 days. And we're going to analyse that and a lot more. Joined in studio, of course, by political analyst Mr. Sandile Swana. Via video link, we have international relations expert Dr. Oscar van Heerden, as well as social commentator Kondile Kedama. Gentlemen, a good evening to you. Thank you so much. It's been such a busy week. And I think a lot of what we saw also taking place, really just a lot of the focus also on international sort of relations and what's happening on the globe as well. But I want to start with what we've just seen there, Mr. Swana. Julius Malema going back to Elon Musk and Donald Trump, calling for him to be labeled an international criminal. And he feels that that is why he's been denied the visa to that trip to the UK to speak at Cambridge University. Do you believe that?
Oh, thank you so much, Naledi. Yeah, I think we've entered a dangerous period. I think after we got out of colonialism, people said there was neocolonialism. I don't know what they are going to call this. The UK have been duplicitous for a long time. When they ended slavery, they came up with a new concept of indentured labor. They came up with the City of London, which is a business which is not part of the territory of the rulership, the governance of the United Kingdom. Major money laundering business, because they could no longer hold colonies. So right now, what we are seeing happening to Malema, and I hope the ANC comrades can see that what is coming to them, because Trump and company have got a list of the comrades that must receive perhaps worse treatment than Malema. The EFF and the ANC, in my judgment, are going to be targeted by the United States and the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is a puppet of the United States. They are not independent. They are a puppet of the United States. So they are definitely, in my judgment, carrying out the wishes of the United States, more especially the view that was expressed by J.D. Vance, the view that says there is a need right now to unite those who believe in Western white Christian civilization. And Ibrahim Rasool identified this and analyzed it correctly, in my judgment. And we are now seeing the manifestation of that analysis that Ibrahim Rasool put on the table.
That's quite a view. I want to bring in Dr. van Heerden here, because you've got, of course, the letter from the British High Commission in Pretoria that was addressed to Mr. Gadi, to Godrich Gadi, by Anthony Phillipson, the High Commissioner. And in it, he says, I'd like to assure you that I've taken a personal interest in this issue and have been in regular communication with relevant Home Office officials about the case, including over the last week. And this morning, I'm afraid, though, that I have no means of intervening in the decision-making process itself, which is solely a matter for the Home Office. So seemingly, the High Commission saying, there's not much I can do here. I mean, what do you make of what this does, if at all, for relations between South Africa and the UK?
Well, just two things, Naledi. You know, firstly, the truth of the matter is that the British High Commission is not going to give us the true reasons why the visa was declined, because that would have to then feed into some of the views that we've just heard being expressed, that there is a conservative, right-wing element that is crept into the Labour government in the UK, and of course expressed also by J.D. Vance, Trump, Elon Musk and others in the United States. I suspect that if he applies for a visa to the US in the coming weeks or months, he will get the same treatment. So they won't give us the real reason. They are going to skirt the issue. They are going to want to try to come across as civilized. It was a bank holiday, a public holiday, etc., etc. The truth of the matter is the visa doesn't come from the UK. It is people that is working here. But be that as it may, the second issue is that the United Kingdom, the government, has always used this issue that there is somehow a separation between immigration and the Home Office. If it's convenient, they say that if you were turned back from the airport, for example, for whatever reason, they say they don't get involved in immigration matters. It's something separate. Now we see that they're saying that the Home Office is involved in this, whereas actually the visa was denied by the consulate. So it's just playing games. I think that there is concern, rightfully so. I think that we are going to see more and more of the United Kingdom, the broader Europe, and the United States beginning to refuse visas for people that supposedly hold different views.
Yeah. Gondile, this is where we bring you in because obviously you're a social commentator, but you also are specializing in government communications. Does government speak out? What does it say?
Well, we've seen the department, the DICO, did make a statement to say earlier on immigration in particular, that this process has to be given attention and that there is a bit of background work that is being done in terms of consultation and so. But when it comes to the case of Julius Malema, it becomes a separate case because if you look at the US at the moment, it is hypersensitive. Anything that has got to do with politics or any narration, it becomes a bit sensitive to it. And we know for the fact that Julius is outspoken. We know for the fact that Julius has been very vocal when it comes to issues of US and obviously the president itself. So one is not necessarily surprised that this is emerged, that there were delays, there were holidays and all that. To me, it didn't come as a surprise because one thing that one could see, it is the sensitivity of the US. And unfortunately, the admin sometimes reacts on what comes from the space or the politics itself. So admin, it's supposed to be independent, but it's also influenced by what is happening on the ground. So the issue of Malema, for me, didn't come as a surprise. But also, one of the things that is interesting, it is how the media locally, internationally, and in the continent has been covering some of these things. You could see that the South African and Africa context is different from what is happening on the other side. So for me, that is what I'm actually looking into deeply and actually look at the trends. I mean, if you look at it, Naledi, the president has been issuing these executive orders regularly, and you wouldn't be surprised that if he brings another thing that is related to South Africa specifically, because you can see there is no other country that US is actually looking into at the moment except for South Africa itself.
Well, there's a lot, actually. I'd argue that Trump is busy with quite a few countries. Just this week, we saw an interesting exchange between himself and, Canadian government, which is, just a colorful moment to be watching. One of the things that we also saw Donald Trump do recently, Mr. Swan, I want to come back to you, was we saw an image go up on social media, which we know he uses quite well. Donald Trump clad in papal regalia, if you will. Then, of course, later on denying that AI-generated picture was his own doing. And then, of course, we get to the end of this week where we see an American Pope. Of course, when we speak to religious leaders, they argue there is no politics. Once those leaders, once those cardinals are in conclave, do you believe that?
No, there are church politics. I'm a churchman myself. There are church politics. The history of the church, we will not go into that. The church is a political entity. The Roman Catholic Church is the most powerful church entity or religious entity on earth, by the way, right now. Now, those politics take many twists and turns. But we can also, there is potential for the peoples of the global south. I suppose that is what this concerns. It's an interesting candidate that has come up. I mean, and I was looking at the statistics this morning. They were saying that this guy had a 2% chance of winning the race anyway. However, there are interesting features that he has, Pope Leo XIV. One being that he's a Creole. In other words, his family were coloureds when they were coloureds. At some stage, they were recorded as black. And obviously, in the US, you are able, in the process of time, to pass on as white. You can graduate and become white at a certain point.
Graduate.
Yes, there are many of them have graduated. Now, and then the other part of it is that he worked in Peru and he's got Peruvian citizenship. The people of Peru see him as that. So in terms of understanding both sides of the Latin American politics and realities of life of the global south for 20 years in Peru and also then in the US. So in that sense, he could on his own. And by the way, he actually wrote in February, I think it was the 1st of February, a critique of J.D. Vance's in essence, classification of societies. That J.D. Vance has got this idea that you look after your own people and you grade people. And he presented that as a Christian doctrine. And the Pope, he's now a Pope, he was a cardinal then when he wrote it in February, he critiqued that. He tore it apart. So he has thrown his first punch. At least on paper, we can say this could be a reasonable fellow.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. And one wonders, of course, whether you view him as liberal or conservative and what that would sort of influence that it has on global politics, if at all. But we're going to get into that and a lot more. It's been an incredibly busy week, and we're highlighting some of the big stories of the past 7 days. You're more than welcome to send us a WhatsApp as well. 072-110-5584. Be part of the conversation by giving us a call. What story stood out for you in the past week? 010-594-6010. We're back in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Newsfeed PM, the late edition with myself, Naledi Moleo. And we look back on the week that was, as we do every other Sunday. And we're taking your calls as well. 010-594-6010. Andile is calling in from Durban. Andile, good evening.
Good evening, Naledi. How are you?
I'm well, sir. Talk to us.
Good. There's 2 points I want to mention. One, I did understand what Trump is doing to Malema because he's an outspoken person. That's point number one. Point number two, what is surprising me is that today I've seen on the news the Afrikaners that are going to Trump's country, and I'm failing to understand why Malema, because he was invited in the university, why they're not allowing him to go there is because of the politics. They know that is they do understand that is an outspoken person. That is why they're refusing to give him the visa.
Thank you so much for that, Andile. Yeah, interesting perspectives indeed. Let's see some of the WhatsApps that have come in as well this evening. 072-110-5584. Anonymous says, let them go, Naledi. They'll come back again when Trump steps down after 4 years. Anonymous, thanks for sending in that WhatsApp. And Joseph Mashiro says, I think those Afrikaners who decided to leave South Africa, they never pondered deeply about the decision they made. Leaving the country of your origin to immigrate to another country you never have any experience in. And this is the big question, is what happens to them on the other side of this flight landing? Of course, we're keeping a close eye on that flight as well. We've got Zola Shalwana, who is at the OR Tambo International Airport, where those 49 white Afrikaners are set to leave. So we are going to bring you the live visuals of when that flight does take off. We've got the flight tracker as well. So we'll be tracking that flight as it lands in the US. Of course, a lot of expectation around what happens on the other side of that. Can we get to that, Dr. van Heerden? The official understanding that we have is that once these 49 South Africans arrive in Washington, D.C., they will meet government officials, U.S. government officials. What is the outcome? I mean, where do you see this going for them, and certainly the benefit for the U.S. and Trump administration?
Look, I mean, I think that we can speculate. Remember, there's a big debate about whether they are refugees. The Trump administration is insisting that they are, and I suspect they are insisting on the terminology refugee because that gives them a sense of how to treat them and what to do with them. Because remember, you have asylum seekers, you have migrants, there's different categorizations. But as refugees, I think the insistence on the term refugee is in line with wanting to embarrass South Africa. That there are now people in democratic South Africa, a country that has always been held up as a moral authority, and now they've become so bad that they now have refugees, that people that are being persecuted, people that are running away from conflict, war, and indeed what they say is white genocide. So this is all about wanting to embarrass the South African government, and hence they insist on the word refugee. When they arrive there, indeed they will meet with officials, but that's only because they will be told what will be the next steps. Remember, with refugees, there are rules around you are not a full citizen. You can do certain things, you can't do certain things. I think they are going to be told about that. They are going to be told how they are going to be allocated to various states. They're not going to be sticking together. Some might go to Nebraska, others might go to Texas, and so forth. And they will be going to refugee centers, first and foremost. There is a process, as you know, to become citizens of the United States, like in any country. It's not an overnight thing. I don't think they realize what it means to have refugee status. It's not, very welcome here and here's a paycheck at the end of every month in infinitum. So it's going to be a very interesting journey. But clearly, I want to reiterate the point. Trump is doing this based on lies, because the Trump administration wants to internationally embarrass South Africa as a country and the South African government.
Vulindlela, I see you nodding. And I look at the situation, I wonder if when these 49 individuals arrive in the US, that the Trump administration may very well see the opportunity to say, give them the podium. Let them tell us how bad things are in South Africa.
Yes, Naledi, but you may get the opposite of what you want as the US, because we do not know the status of that 49 as to were they employed, they go there simply because they also want opportunities in the US. So that did not come out clearly. But the other thing that is interesting is that there is no explanation of the criteria that has been used to for an example, to allow them to go to the US when they get into the US. Because when you listen to other media houses, they will tell you that they've been promised houses in different places around the US. They'll be getting this, they'll be getting all the benefits and so forth. So I think for us, it's to observe and check as to what comes out of the whole thing, because criteria is not necessarily clear. Even now, the doc is saying they'll be welcomed. There's a likelihood that they'll be welcomed by the admin people and so. So they'll have to wait for the instruction from above. And what happens in the meantime? Are they going to be taken into those refugee places? And what if Naledi is a working doctor in South Africa and is there, and then all of a sudden she is being taken to the refugee establishment, and the communique did not say that. So I think we should really wait and see what is going to happen. It's still early, but I can tell you now that I do not think they are as organized as they want to show the world.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and I just want to see, what happens on the other side of it, because there's questions about whether or not there'll be more people that also want to hop on. But let's take some calls. David is in Eguvilini. David, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for accepting my call and greetings to the panel.
Thank you so much for calling. Talk to us.
Yes, I think firstly, I want to challenge this refugee status thing. You know, I can only sum up it. Some animals are more equal than others, because there is no way a refugee has got to be vetted. First of all, we have been having people that cross borders as refugees, and they are refugees in South Africa. They have never been vetted by their own countries. This is a record breaking to say South Africa vet the people that are unhappy with the system of South Africa. And our government is also gullible and falls into that trap, whereby it is a denunciation of South Africa as a state. And it's a warning to Africa. Africans, they will be undressed and humiliated. Whoever leads, it will be the same. And I might also have this comment on the Omotoso. Can it be looked like, hello?
Yes, I'm listening, David.
Yeah, I want us to look at both sides of the coin. It might be some church people that are using the system, or the man himself might be a fugitive of the law.
Okay.
It might be wrong. I just want to be neutral on that.
All right, David, thank you so much for calling in. There's a lot to talk about on the international stage, but I want to come back to some of our own issues here at home. We're getting closer and closer to the 21st of May. Budget 3.0, as we hear it called over and over again, Mr. Swan. I want to hear what you make of what we're going to get on the other side of it. Will we get smooth running of the passing of this budget? We know that the GNU members have agreed on that they're going to work together to see that VAT hike, of course, not now reversed. I wonder, firstly, where this leaves a party like BOSA and Action SA, after all those efforts to try and help the ANC to pass the budget, but the red flags that you see in us being able to get to the other side of it.
I think that Kodongwana has been aware for some time, long before the GNU, that there's one number that he needs to get right, and he's never been able to get it right. And that number then creates problems for everybody. That number is the GDP growth rate, right? So that number is going to be a bone of contention, because both the DA and the ANC unfortunately have no credibility around that number. The Western Cape has not produced the number. The City of Cape Town has not produced the number. None of the other provinces has ever produced that number, other than during the Mbeki era. So right now, a lot of the conflict that you see is about whether you can get to the number. That number is above 3%. And that's a long shot if you're already at about 0.6. So that's the first thing. The other thing that is there, which is confusing the parties, including the ANC and the DA, because they don't openly speak about it and they do need to resolve it before the 21st, is the issue of introducing efficiency in the state. And the efficiency reports are on the table. As long as Ozibu said he's got the reports that where the efficiencies can be. Efficiency is not austerity. Austerity needs to be abolished. Austerity must be abolished, completely abolished. Efficiency, yes, so that you can get the return on investment. I mean, like this thing that, what is his name, the Minister of Home Affairs, says he can process 1.4 million IDs. Schreiber, yeah. So that's efficiency, which means there's been some inefficiency that had to be resolved. So there's a lot of these places at our police stations, at our courts, all over the show, in the procurement system that needs, and those things can actually add to the GDP growth rate. So for me, they need to resolve those issues among themselves, and they then have a chance of getting the budget passed. They know they have to get the budget passed, but they need to agree on that. The last thing I will say about this is that Kodongana admitted that it was just a brainwave that he got to introduce the VAT increase. Now, you can't run a nation on VAT waves and thumbsucks. That was wrong. A nation like South Africa needs to be run on basis on science, especially the economics and numbers, proper mathematics. So I hope that tantrum is abandoned it, and there's no other tantrum is going to bring there. So I am quite optimistic that the budget has got a better chance of passing this time.
Yeah, you know, this week we also saw the president launching phase 2 of Operation Vulindlela, you know, to, as they say, to address the lack of grid capacity where electricity is concerned and really try and deal with the efficiencies of the various network industries, right? Whether it be transport and so forth. Are you confident in that? I mean, we certainly talk about the investment drive that's necessary for Operation Vulindlela, you know, bringing in business as well to invest in the infrastructure work that needs to be done. But we had a conversation this week with the former Statistician General, Dr. Badile Hotla, who, you know, I think plainly saying that this is words that are easily used to set a goal, but are not necessarily going to bring us any real fruit in terms of improving efficiency, as you say.
Yes. In terms of the numbers, I listened to Badile Hotla as well. In terms of the numbers that were supposed to have been achieved by now, because when they started this thing, basically the number we're watching is whether in actual fact the GDP growth actually goes up. The GDP growth rate is going down. They have not managed to arrest the decline of the growth. They've given a lot of excuses that we've not been here. The Operation Vulindlela team, they said that we've not been here, things would have been worse. Now, I've never bought that type of argument before. So for 4 years, since 2020 to now, they've not been able to produce the results, the actual results. Number two, the other problem we have is that comrades, when they put these plans out there, there's no due date. It's like I asked many, many times over, when is the load shedding going to be finished, comrades? And we never got a firm date on that. So Operation Vulindlela has not been successful from 2020 to now in terms of delivering, lowering unemployment, long-term unemployment, reducing that, and then getting the GDP growth rate towards or above 3% and towards the 5.4% stipulated. That have not achieved. So when I look forward now, unemployment from now to 2029 is going to increase to 4 million. If it's 12 million, to 14 million. If it's now at 12.2, it's going to increase roughly by about 500,000 per year until that time. Let's say between 300 and 500,000 per year. It's going to increase, not going to reduce. Whilst Operation Vulindlela is there in place, right? The issues of them boasting about they are taking services that are offered by the state and privatizing them through triple Ps. You know, I discovered a word that the French people introduced, the remunicipalization. We talk about nationalization and renationalization, privatization, renationalization. Now they took municipal services, privatized them. Now they are remunicipalizing them, taking them back. The UK is suffering that. So it's not a one-way street of success. There is often an overrating by the private sector and the billionaires of South Africa that they are more competent than anybody else.
Sure. Lots to talk about. And unfortunately, we're running out of time, but we're going to wrap up some of the big themes and certainly what we do in the new week after this short break. Do stay with us. Welcome back. We're still looking back on the week that was with our panel and taking calls as well on 010-594-6010. Maurice is calling in from Johannesburg. Maurice, good evening.
Hi, Naledi. How are you doing?
I'm well. Thank you so much for calling. Talk to us.
Naledi, I wanted to comment on this crazy flight of crazy Afrikaners going to crazy Trumpian America.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm a second-generation white South African. I have a biological son who's white, and I have an adopted daughter who's black. And one of the things that I've always said to my son, who's a chef by training, is he must never, ever, ever come to me, as we often read about in the press and so on, and say that there is reverse discrimination in South Africa, and that he, as a white kid, is somehow being discriminated against. Because the reality is that in our South Africa of 2025, white people are still much more privileged than the majority of black people. Of course, there's a few poor white people around, but the bulk of white people are still more privileged than the bulk of black South Africans. And this craziness about Trump and his buying into this narrative that somehow the South Africa is, post-apartheid South Africa is discriminating against whites and particularly Afrikaners is just madness. It's something out of fantasy.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Maurice. You know, it's been said as well that this debate that has come on with the Afrikaners that are leaving the country for the US also very divisive in the country, and that's where I want to go next and say, Vulindlela, you know, you've got actually NSA leader Herman Mashaba, who this week actually called for a dialogue, right? But these calls for a dialogue have been made, and I don't know what progress we're making where that's concerned. And if now that the global community is watching South Africa very well, that the sooner that dialogue happens, perhaps could put us in a better position.
Well, Naledi, there are a number of countries that have gone through this. I remember one of the years I was in Belgium, and they were going through almost the same situation that you find in South Africa. But for me, what is critical, especially when it comes to the GNU itself, one had expected that, as Dr. Susan is saying, some kind of efficiencies now that DA is now participating fully in government. This is what they've been talking about, good governance, efficient government, and so on. But that does not seem to be coming out strongly. The other thing that for me it's very tricky or triggering is that if you look at the process of the budget, and it's always been my view, and I'm open about that the consultation process was not necessarily done in a way that would convince the majority of South Africans. In fact, even amongst themselves as parliamentarians, as political organizations, normally processes of this nature happens inside the House. But what GNU has brought about is that when it comes to process of a budget, there's got to be a proper consultation. There's got to be a serious role that is being played by stakeholders, so that as you get into the final stages of passing the budget, at least there's a common ground. Now, what is happening? People out there see politicians fighting amongst themselves, wanting to score political points, but at the heart of it, it's communities that must benefit from the budget. And that does not come out strongly from politicians. And I'm sure this is one thing that most of our technocrats must do. Make sure that it's proper consultation until the last stage of budget. And Naledi, we haven't seen that. Well, I like when Dr. Zutana says the minister was throwing tantrums and what. But I am saying, if things were taken stage by stage, phase by phase, we wouldn't be faced with this type of situation. I would want to see and hear what happens when they go back to the parliament. But clearly, the issue of consultation has to be strengthened and has to be given a serious attention. Okay,
I need to wrap this up. But final thoughts from you, Dr. van Heerden, on just how we improve brand South Africa at such a difficult time when you've got 49 South Africans that are leaving us behind. You've got this public spat between a Julius Malema, for instance, at Home Office in the UK. Where are the green shoots that we can capitalize on for brand South Africa?
Well, I mean, I think just a few points, Naledi. On the budget issue, efficiency, rapid interventions, professionalization, all of these things cost money. And so I think the minister is going to be hard-pressed to find the money. He didn't get his 15 billion for the VAT. He didn't get his 10 billion in terms of the growth projections that has been spoken about, and so on and so forth. So there's a huge gap And I think that we're going to see sparks flying. We should get our popcorn and get ready for budget night. On Maurice's call, it's not as crazy as we think. There is a plan. Trump has a plan. The Trump administration has a plan. The fact that they have put us South Africa, put us part of the axis of evil with Russia and China and Iran, even though they also trade with those countries. The fact that they are questioning our human rights track record in terms of our domestic crime and service delivery, and casting aspersions on how we treat people like these refugees, which we know is all lie. It's all part of a bigger plan of wanting to discredit South Africa, wanting to say that South Africa is not so special anymore. Yeah. And it's all because, I suspect, because of what South Africa and what the South African government has done with regards to the Israel case at the ICJ, and so on and so forth. And then the green shoots, just to finally say, it's about staying principled and true to our values, true to being Ubuntu. The foreign policy is based on human rights. It's about solidarity with those that are suffering in the world. And if we are going to have to be bullied, cajoled and blackmailed because other foreign governments want us to step in line, then we have to stay the course and say we won't be bullied.
Yeah,
and that will have...
Yeah, Dr. Van Heerden, thank you so much. Yeah. Final thoughts from you, Mr. Swana, before we close off. Again, I want to go back to how we are keeping a close eye on things on OR Tambo. What's the thing that we say as a country as we continue to watch that unfold?
I think that as a country, to ourselves, we have to go back to what Thabo Mbeki said before in 1998, that we are two nations in one. If people can tell this type of lies about South Africa, blatant lies, and work with foreigners such as Donald Trump who write those lies on official state documents, then clearly there can be no patriotism there. And that is what needs to be corrected.
Patriotism. Thank you so much for speaking to us, gentlemen. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you to Kondile Ketama, social commentator, Dr. Oscar Van Heerden, the international relations expert, and Mr. Sandile Swana, political analyst in studio with us. You're still watching Newsfeed PM, the late edition. More news on the other side of this. Stay with us.